Welcome to Becoming Limitless. This is the podcast for entrepreneurs who want to optimize their brain and their body with biohacking. I'm going to teach you how to eliminate brain fog and upgrade your health so you can have more productivity, energy, and growth in your business. I'm your host, Tanessa Shears. Let's jump in. Welcome back to the Becoming Limitless podcast. How has your week been? I hope it has been well rested with plenty of good sleep and lots of nutritious food. I'm really excited because I got a treat for you today. This is the first ever episode of the Becoming Limitless podcast in which we are featuring a guest interview. Now you'll hear today on the interview exactly how Alex Lianne Carter and I met. But it was this sentence that I saw on her website that completely sold me. She said, I help high-performing female leaders neurohack their way to success and supercharge their productivity to reach high performance without burnout. I was like, oh my gosh, I love that. That complements what I love. So today's episode is all about neurohacking for high achievers. And you're going to meet Alex Lianne Carter today. And she's a high-performance productivity NeuroCoach, a business mentor, and founder of Ambition Unleashed. She works with high achievers to master their millionaire mindset, supercharge their productivity, and up-level their leadership skills so they can create a greater impact and hit 7 figures without the burnout. And we talk a lot about burnout today, including what it is, how to tell if it's coming on, and how to start reversing all of the things that are contributing to all the overwhelm and the procrastination that eventually lead to our burnout. So you'll hear her story about her own nervous breakdown she had and exactly what it takes to live your best and most fulfilling life. So today, through her signature AAA framework and achievement mindset method, Alex shares her hard-won knowledge with other ambitious female leaders as she teaches them how to manage their time better, which I love, focus and energy to achieve peak performance both personally and professionally so they can create the impact they desire and the lives they love without all the overwhelm. So I know you're going to love this interview. So buckle up and let's jump into the interview. All right, we are jumping into the very first interview on the Becoming Limitless podcast, and I am so excited for this interview today. We have Alex Lianne Carter here today, and we're going to meet her. She's going to tell you about what she does. It was so interesting. We met because she approached me about a month ago to be part of her summit, which you're going to hear about at the end of the episode today. And I went through her Instagram, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is me. We both have babies. We both have businesses that are involved in the hacking space when it comes to do with productivity and how our brain works and incorporating things like sleep and stuff like that. We really focus on productivities. Like we're both Canadian. Like there are so many things that we have in common. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so fun. I have to have her on the show. So we are bringing her on today to talk all about neurohacking and specifically neurocoaching, which is, it seems like almost another channel of what I do, but focusing a little more on the brain. So I would love for you to jump in and tell us about who you are, how you got into this.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. And likewise, right? I remember looking up your Instagram and thinking, oh my goodness, it'd be so powerful to have you part of this summit. So it's great to be able to be here and our roles are reversed and me getting to share a bit about my journey. So how did I get into neurocoaching and sort of, learning and really analyzing productivity? It actually stems from a burnout that I experienced in the fall of 2019. High achiever, working 12-hour days, really wanting to perform well and, often, really looked for approval from the people that I worked with, right? And then, I didn't want to let anybody down. And then, just all this internal dialogue. And it became to the point that I was just so afraid to fail. I was so afraid to make a mistake and got caught in these loops of perfectionism and procrastination, overwhelm. And finally, I just had got to my body and my body just started to shut down on me. And it took a while actually. And, that's where I started looking into, a little bit more of my health as well. But my body was just, I've had enough and literally just shut down on me. And I ended up being off work for over 6 months. And during that process, I started to see a therapist to understand what caused this burnout, what's happening. And, I started to learn all about our minds and, this internal dialogue that takes place. And as high achievers, we set such high expectations for ourselves, and we really, tie up very much our worth, our worth to our work and the things that we do and the approvals that we get from everybody else. And I started to be introduced to this idea of, our subconscious mind and this subconscious thoughts that run on, autopilot and really stem from, stories that you hear that are repeated over time. And it's crazy that I learned that eventually it actually contributes like 90% of our actions. And it just made a lot of sense of why I started to procrastinate and be so afraid to fail, was because of all this internal dialogue going on in my mind that I was kind of aware of, but not really aware of until I dove into like learning about the neuroscience. And that's where, the journey of becoming a neurocoach kind of started, when I started to realize, like, speaking to a lot of high achievers, these stories and beliefs that we have ingrained in us, that stem from our childhood and stem from, external environmental factors that we just happen to kind of absorb, so to speak, and they just become sort of ingrained in us and just kind of how we live. And I started to realize that, once I could figure out what those were and like why was I so afraid to fail? Like, what was I so afraid of? And it was because I was afraid to let people down. And if I let people down, it meant that, they couldn't rely on me, or that I wasn't, worthy and loved and all of these things. And so it's been fascinating really diving into this and working with a lot of high achievers and figuring out, what's coming up for them when they're, trying to up level in their business and, reach for that 6 and 7 figure mark. And so, it's really neat to now dive into people's stories and hear what comes up for them. And, and tying in also the brain part of it, but also, the health side of it, and like with the burnout piece, also looking at taking care of ourselves, and really ensuring that as much as our brain is sort of nourished, that we also look at our body as well in other aspects that I know that you and I have a lot in common for that. So so that's a little bit kind of the journey and, how I got to where I am today.
Oh, that's so interesting. So, how would you know that you're like heading towards that burnout or just, hitting the end of the rope? Like, how do you tell the difference between just being overwhelmed and having a lot on your plate right now and it crossing the line into like, this is something that can't be healthy anymore?
For me, what I noticed, so there were a couple of factors. One thing was the exhaustion, like the constant feeling exhausted. It was like my body was kind of shutting down and needing to rest. And it started off whereas I could never sleep, right? Your brain just cannot turn off the stress and anxiety of not being able to sleep. And I started moving and doing exercise. And so I was able to fall asleep easier at that aspect, but it was like I still just couldn't get rested enough. So that was the number one thing. The other thing was the ability to make a decision. Like I just, this whole paralysis analysis thing, I just was like, I could not commit. And I just kept saying, I don't know, and thinking, I don't know. And that was actually the breaking point. It was someone that came and asked me a very simple question that was really, like, when I think about it, it was like an easy answer, but I just felt this pressure to have the right answer. And because I couldn't think of the right perfect answer at that time, that was kind of like my breaking point. And so there was that. And and the constant, I guess it comes back to the decision, like that whole procrastination piece, like getting stuck in, sorry, well, it was procrastination, but the perfectionism. I was so afraid to fail and make a mistake. And it was the anxiety that built up inside of me. And so I started to have almost an debilitating anxiety and, feeling very sick all the time, the headaches that I was getting, I had IBS, like just could never settle. And I was very much on edge. And the weekend kind of after sort of my breaking point happened, I remember, and this is how I knew that something was not right. We were going hiking, and I have a pretty one hack for productivity is like being very organized, and like I had like my hiking outfit, so I already had it picked out. But yet the just getting dressed to go hiking and the choice I had to make between maybe 2 different shirts to wear hiking was too much for me, and I broke down again. And then I was just like, what is happening? And, the lack of motivation was a really big thing too. Just feeling like I'm just completely living on constant autopilot, just spinning on this hamster wheel, feeling exhausted. I just want to get off. And it was like, something's got to change because it's like I can't see the end in sight or something like that.
Oh, so then what happened next? What was the first thing you were like, okay, I'm going to start here. this can't go on, what does the first thing you did to help get you back to, I guess, the high performer that you are now?
So first thing was, I actually went to the doctor to figure out like what the heck is going on, because I had said to work, I'm going to be back tomorrow. And then I knew, and I'd slept all day that first day. And so I was like, okay, well, I need to go to the doctors and understand like what's happening here. And, from there, it was like doctor to therapist to psychiatrist, like really trying to understand like what was the cause. But as I was seeing, those doctors, I was really doing a lot of internal kind of figuring like, okay, what is missing? Like what's happening? And I realized like I wasn't happy anymore. So I started buying books on happiness, like how to be happy again. And then I started to, like books on happiness and joy, resilience. That was the other thing. I started to lack resilience. And so because I noticed that as well, I was buying books on resiliency. And all I wanted was to be motivated. Like that was what I would wake up saying, I just want to be motivated again. Like what happened to the fire in me where I would wake up out of bed and just love what I do? Like I just feel that I've been completely depleted. And it was when I saw the therapist and she kind of opened up my eyes to, this internal dialogue that was going on in my head, contributing to, this thoughts and how I was feeling, and just contributed like decisions and actions, and a lot of this, like storyteller in me, right? Like I would start to predict the outcome of a situation before it ever happened, but it was always very negative. So I did a lot of work on trying to work through shifting the mindset and trying to stop looking at always the negative thing, trying to look at, what could be the other side. So like reading the book Mindset, like trying to understand more about growth mindset. I thought I was always someone with a growth mindset, was always, looking on the bright side of things. But it was fascinating as I dug into that to learn more about that. So I did a lot of reading. It was a lot of reading, a lot of podcasts. And that's actually where I found my coach and mentor. And I remember her saying in the podcast I was listening to, so it was Hal Elrod from, Miracle Morning, and Dr. Shannon Irvin. And, she sort of shared her journey and how she was kind of, she'd gotten pregnant and she was trying to figure out like, there's got to be a better way, because she was just, like, did she have to choose between like being a mom and being a very successful entrepreneur? And at that point, my husband and I had kind of talked about like maybe starting a family, but I was looking at where I was looking at where I had been. And I'm like, there's got to be some changes, because if I keep doing what I did before, I'm just going to end up burning myself out again. And it was not sustainable. And then that moment was when my mentor talked about this neurocoaching and learning about the neurocoaching model, and just, a step-by-step process that really helps to uncover these blind spots, these blind spots that come up for us that prevent us from kind of, I see it being productive, right? Because, when we have this goal and this vision, as high achievers as we are, right? Well, that requires us to make certain actions. And the actions that we take are then based on the decisions that we're going to make. And the decisions that we make relate to the identity that we have. And then this identity becomes from these beliefs that are like internally. And I like to kind of talk about the heart. And then you go to the mind, right? These beliefs come from these thoughts and emotions that get repeated after time. And that always stems from this sort of situation or event that you would have possibly witnessed as a kid, or heard over and over. Like money, money stories are often things that come up a lot, right? When we hear a lot about, does money grow in, we hear as kids growing up, like, does money grow on trees? You have to work hard to be successful, right? Then you kind of get in this cycle of, I need to work hard to be successful. I need to work hard to be successful. And that oftentimes gets us in these cycles of like, there's constant work, and then this burnout piece, because that's what we constantly kind of hear internally without us being aware of it. I think that's the big thing. We don't know these beliefs necessarily exist until we start to dive into them. So
yeah. It's so interesting. I actually had my most powerful coaching moment when I was 26 weeks pregnant as well. I was just like, how the heck do you do this? How do you be a mom and a business? And what if I fail and I should just give up now? And I had, it was a really powerful moment. And she said to me, she's like, you can't let your business, like, you can't give that responsibility to your unborn baby. If you decide to unwind it, that is your decision. If you decide to have it thrive, that'll be your decision. You know what I mean? And learning like, oh, I get to choose what happens after, and you can't predict what that's going to be like. And so just to be able to be like, oh, I get to choose all that. And I'm seeing how much the way my mind in that moment shifted was what allowed my business to grow more in the first year after I had my baby than in years previous. It was absolutely fascinating to watch. But so I'm curious. So you became a neuro coach after going through your breaking point.
Yes. Yeah. So that to me, so it's interesting because a lot of, those that did neurocoaching, they were in there because they had, they had a coaching business or they were growing this business. And I just wanted to fix myself. I literally, like, that was the reason. Like when I started to learn about, you know, the subconscious mind and like how our brains are wired and diving into the neuroscience, I literally made the decision. I was like, okay, this is what's going to help me get fixed. I'm going to fix myself by doing this. This is how I'm going to get my motivation back. And it was in the process of me fixing myself, I kind of, sort of had that aha moment where I woke up one day. I'm like, wait a second. As I started talking to other, female high achievers, in certain leadership positions or even as entrepreneurs, even as new moms, I started to see like, oh my goodness, there's a whole slew of me out there that I could help, through this process and help someone overcome this burnout, hopefully prevent even getting to that point, helping them like level up and get to greater success in their business and create a greater impact. Because just by being able to have these, like listening to them and using, doing this neurocoaching model, like walking them through that. And that was kind of where my big aha moment was, because I was very much driven by, the flexibility and freedom to, be able to have time with my daughter, travel as well. We have family lives all over the world, and it's a little bit harder right now with the pandemic. But that's kind of sort of a vision that I had that was very much driving me. And I was like, this is it. I kind of dabbled a little bit into fitness and health coaching when I had experienced some other moments of like close to burnout prior to that, where, I kind of ramped up my health and fitness and really dove into that. But when I learned about being able to coach high achievers, like that was what lit me up and got me excited that I could help other women like myself. And yeah, and so that's kind of here we are today, and why I started hosting summits, for that same sort of reason. So
Yeah. So, I mean, we work with very similar people. My groups are specifically entrepreneurs. Your high performers come from a variety of backgrounds as well. So, what do you see as one of the main things that your clients or the people you work with are struggling at this point? And what is the first thing you get them to do?
a lot of times it's putting the blinders on. So first of all, really getting them to slow down so they can speed up, really checking like alignment as well. A lot of times as high achievers, we get, distracted by the whole shiny object syndrome. And so we kind of know where we want to go, but then this other thing comes up. And so then we go to that versus really being clear on that vision and the deep why. I was talking about the why that'll make us cry. So having really like real clarity on that. And then the slowing down to speed up is then taking a look at sort of the bigger picture of it and understand like how you're going to get there, and really again try to focus on one thing at a time, versus looking at so many different things, because that's what I notice is the distraction between a lot of things at once. Mm-hmm. And then that's where they'll get a lot of like a little bit of traction, and then they fall back, and they get a little bit of traction, they fall back because they're getting a bit of momentum, but then they get distracted, and it's so hard to kind of get to that next, what is it, sort of the end goal, but propel forward if you keep getting distracted all the time. And so I would say that's the big real clarity thing. And then really breaking down into bite-sized chunks, how to take action. I think that was the other thing for me is, I guess at high achievers, like we'll look at the big goal, but we don't always necessarily take a step back to really look at those specific actionable items that you can take. And I remember actually this was when I was pregnant learning this, and it was like a game changer. We all hear like, schedule your top 3 priorities. Like that's a really common thing in productivity. And if those haven't heard before, people might hear eat the frog. Like the idea is like really focusing on the most important things. But what happens, and I found this with myself, and even when I'm working with the clients, when I look at when people are tasked with like, what's your biggest goal for the week? Or, what are some of your non-negotiables? It's so big that it's not specific enough that when you sit down to take action, that you know exactly what to do. And what happens is that this creates overwhelm in our brains, and our brains need clarity. So when you sit down, and I was give a blog, writing a blog for an example. So if you have on your agenda, write blog, you sit down and write your blog and you're staring at a blank screen. And you're like, oh my goodness, I need to write this blog. And you notice that you're not getting any, you can't get there. It's because it's too big, right? So it's like really taking a step back and further, like, what do you need to write the blog? Well, you might need to do some research. Maybe you need to brainstorm some title ideas. Maybe you need some images to go with your blog. Trying to think of some of the other examples. The brainstorming, like just brainstorming what you're going to write the blog about, or what are some topic ideas, right? And so when you're able to kind of step back more and more and write down really specifically what that looks like, I mean, your productivity amps up because you know the moment you sit down what you need to do. And one thing that I'm always, really encouraging is, really taking some time the night before to be able to plan your next day. And so if you can plan out like those 3 little tasks, and I always talk about like putting them on a sticky note on your computer. The moment you sit down, you open up your screen, you have your sticky notes. And the reason why I talk about the sticky note is because how many of us have 100 tabs open on our computers?
Me.
And the moment we open it up, we get distracted by what we left on our screen. So really encourage like having those sticky notes. And the great thing about the sticky notes is, first of all, it gives you a bit of flexibility. So maybe the night before you wanted to do it in this order, but maybe in the morning you're not feeling that, so you can reorder them around. The other thing too is the fact that you can take the sticky off, crumple it up, is a little bit of a mini celebration, which our brains love. So you're giving your brain natural hits of dopamine, which really helps with motivation to keep you going. And the biggest trick, if you're kind of out there listening, thinking, well, how do I break my task down into smaller chunks? Because I've often asked this question too, is if you try to, guesstimate a little bit how long it's going to take a task to get done, and it goes, over an hour, it most likely means you can chunk it down to smaller bits. And even if it's more than 45 minutes, like if you can really get it down to like 15 minutes or 30 minutes, then you know that you have a lot more clarity. And a really good common thing is the whole Pomodoro effect, right? That whole, like with the 25 minutes. So it's those are nice strategies to kind of like, then set your timer for 15 minutes and then try to tackle that, that item. Now, sometimes it's going to take longer, sometimes it'll take less, but just getting into that habit of really being able to be as clear as you possibly can, because that's going to really help you be motivated and actually get tasks done. And then like with my clients, I even take it a layer backwards when we've been goal setting, like being able to like really take the goal and like really work our way down. But even if it's just as simple as that, and I have find like when I learned that was a game changer for my productivity as well, and not to mention for our brains, because it's clear, it's precise, and we know exactly what we're going to do. And I see it all the time, in all these Facebook communities, it's like, what is your number one goal for the week? And people put, I'm going to write content. Well, that's still like, what kind of content? How many pieces of content? Content for what platform, right? And so that's what I want to really encourage the audience is when you're writing down the things you're going to do, like how clear and specific, like could somebody else do what you've got on paper? I think if the answer is no, it's not specific enough. And that can really help remove that overwhelm, especially when you're, needing to get something done.
Yeah. Oh, that's so fun. And the other thing that works really well about what you just said about, breaking things down into tasks that would take 15 minutes, 30 minutes is how to plan your day effectively and be like, this is how many tasks I can realistically fit into this time block. So, I've worked with clients before, as have you probably, where, they'll put 20 things in a day and none of it just rolls to the next day. And they have this ever like running to-do list that, just doesn't work. But I have found just even with something as simple as batch recording my podcast, having like doing the brainstorming, come up with a title, create the images in Canva, record it, add the intro, like every specific step so that I know linearly, here's how I'm productive because here's the order it goes in. And I know exactly how much time it's going to take because I've done it over and over and over. And I think it's not only having these great systems that you talk about, but about editing them and, evaluating them as they go, being like, oh, I did not give enough time for that, or I gave way too much time for that. And I think that's also one of the roadblocks is, we say like, I have no idea how much time that task is going to take. Well, you have to find out by doing it and then editing it every time through. One of the interesting things that I heard you say, what is your why that will make you cry?
Yeah. So, a lot of times when people ask what your why is, you're going to kind of probably shoot off the first thing that comes to mind, right? But the why that you'll make you cry, others might call it like it's like the 7 or 5 or 7 layer deep, is really reflecting on like, and it's asking the question, right? Okay, so when you first answer the question, then it's like, okay, well, why is that important to you? And why is that important? And why is that important? And if that were to happen, what makes things possible? And really digging deeper and deeper and deeper. And like I would say 99.9% of the time when I do this with my clients, there's tears. They like, there's either tears or there's something here, because you know that you struck something. It's the same when on the neurocoaching model, when you're kind of understanding like, what is it? What is the deep down belief that is standing in this, person's way, that's creating this blind spot, that is creating this fear in them, that is creating this procrastination or this imposter syndrome, right? And it's the moment, and again, it's fascinating how many times it strikes a chord or a nerve that people get emotional, right? And so
sorry,
no,
go ahead.
no.
I was just going to say, do you find that when you do this with your clients, is it usually a sentence, or do you have them visualize it, or do you have them write it? Like, how do you pull it out of them?
That's a great question. Usually it's they write it out. So I have these sort of the guiding questions. So it's kind of both. And the power is also repeating their words back to them. So I always encourage, and that's why I really love either, doing the accountability buddy, or when I'm doing it one-on-one with my clients. And if it's a group setting, I always have people group up, because it's the power in hearing your words, right? Because a lot of times we'll say it, but when your partner then, this is important to you because of this, and why is that important? And then you hear it. I think it's in hearing your own words being repeated back to you. That's where the power really comes from. And then that's kind of, because sometimes people think, well, I can't get past 5 whys. You usually know when you've hit there because of the emotion that comes out of it. And so at first, a lot of it is just getting the person to close their eyes and to really visualize and vision that. The other person will repeat back, and the other person will oftentimes like write it out. But then afterwards, once it's kind of written out, the other person will then write it out again. And then when I do this activity with the vision, so once I'm very clear on why they do what they do, because I always say why you do what you do has to be fueled by why you do it. We look at the vision, and then the vision, I actually get them to record their vision, right? So when you look at the future, like, when you're like looking at, okay, we know there's a blind spot coming up from you, but what is that vision that you really want? And see, that's what's really powerful with our brains. Our brains, want to hear something repeated over 67 times, actually changes the neural pathways in our brains. I always like to call them the highways. To actually start to build new highways in your brain that build, that help you get towards your vision of what you really want. That's usually connected to that why, and really helps with you showing up and taking action and having that motivation, right, to step into the person that you need to become to create that vision and fulfill that why.
Oh, I love that. And I always think that it's a 2-part approach to being a high-performing entrepreneur, CEO, whatever your title is. And I think, like we talk about, part of that is your ability to sustain your energy. And I think the other part of that is your why, because I've always been one of those really high achieving students and really high, those people that go to work. I never need to be told what to do. I can just go. And my mom always used to say to me, she used to go, I don't get it. You keep showing up, especially in the early years of my business where it was taking a while to get going. She's like, I don't get it. How do you keep showing up when you don't have that reward all the time? And I was just like, I don't know. Well, it's fun for one, but it's so funny. And I realized what it was, and it didn't quite click until my daughter was born. But I have this vision in my head of me sitting on a deck, and it's sunny, and I'm holding a cup of coffee in my hand, and I can hear my husband and my daughter playing, and he's home from work, and it's like a Tuesday. And that's because of me. My business has grown to the point where he doesn't have to work and he can do what he wants with his time. I bought back our family's freedom, and he doesn't get to miss her taking her first step. And it's those moments, like, I live for that moment, and I create that now with, intentionally bringing joy into my life now. But that's how I'm picturing it then on just another scale. So when you said like creating that feeling, like that is entirely what I talk about too, is that your thoughts or your belief, if they create that feeling, you know they're ringing true. If you're trying to think all these thoughts and that they don't create the emotion of joy or contentment or peace, they're just mantras. We
Yeah.
really want to get and access like what is creating that feeling, because I can get there in my head and I can feel the joy in that moment and it's so real. And I think it's learning how to tap into that. And I know that
Mm-hmm.
some of what you talk about is internal dialogue and playing into our results. So can you tell us a bit about like how that all plays into this?
Well, I just wanted to, can I just loop back to what you said there? I
Yeah.
think it's
Yeah.
something really important to help to show the audience. So what you said, there's that feeling, right? So when you can feel, when you can close your eyes and picture and see and understand what that looks like, our brains will understand the present and the future. And that's the whole power with this vision. That's why with, with recording the vision, to help your brain actually be able to, like you said, like really feel, like I talk about the five senses of that vision, living and experiencing that vision before it's come to fruition, so that you're able to show up every day and take action that's going to make that possible. When you wake up and show up as like who we are right now, you're going to take, actions and decisions based on who you are right now. But if you're able to get your brain to understand that vision that you're trying to create, you're going to take those action decisions to get you there. It's just those blind spots that come up, and that's the part of the neurocoaching, to be able to work through that, to help you get closer to that vision. And so I just wanted, like, when you shared that, I could picture that, right? I could see you sitting there and your husband and your daughter playing, and I could picture you with that coffee. And that's the power of having a really clear vision. And I love how you kind of talked about that, because that was the thing. Like, I did a lot of mindset work like prior to becoming a neurocoach, but there was always something that was like missing. And I think it ties down to that kind of, it's part of having a mantra. I think it's really, really powerful. But there's like a missing piece, I think. And that's what I found with the neurocoaching, and being able to tap into those beliefs and be able to kind of erase those beliefs and create these new beliefs with that align with that vision. That's where I found these major changes. And even with the success of my business, and the motivation, that recognition. So I just wanted to tap on that, because I think that is something that the audience can do as well. If you have a vision, it's always about the five senses, like, you were so descriptive there. I always say, like, a painter could paint your vision because it was so specific. And like what you did there, is so powerful for, I think, the audience to hear that. So sorry, I would ask you to actually repeat your question, because I
No, totally. I get all excited about that too. Like when you really can tap into that feeling, and that's how, when when the moment that you realize that your thoughts are optional and you don't have to keep living into this same reality, that you can choose them. And one of the ways I always, talk with clients about is how to tell if a thought is just like, something you like the idea of, or something that really hits home, is does it create the feeling? It's kind of like, when you go into a clothing store and you grab a bunch of clothes off the rack and you're in the changing room, some clothes fit and you know it, and you don't have to like suck it in or twist or pull the straps up to get it to fit. It just fits. And that's how I tell my clients, that's how is when you get that feeling, having that thought. So if you're thinking something like, I'm going to make $1 million this year, and your brain's like, yeah, right. I mean, that's not going to work. But if you're leaning in, if something brings up excitement and a little bit of nerves, and you feel the way that you want to feel, that's how you can know that's striking a chord. But the question that I asked was like talking about internal dialogue and how that plays into our results. I mean, as entrepreneurs, we always have a goal, and that horizon is always moving. We get there, we celebrate for 10 seconds, and we're off to the races again. So yeah, talk a bit about that.
Well, actually, that's glad that you asked me about that, because one thing I was gonna loop back to with that vision is being clear on how you're gonna celebrate it. Because what's gonna keep us going, and like, again, that motivation piece is those natural hits of dopamine that we get as we celebrate along the way. And we are so guilty, like you said there, we're so guilty as high achievers. We set these really big goals, and the thing is, it's like we don't celebrate until we get to that point. And a lot of times what happens is, sometimes the goal gets thrown off course. And because we had our hearts set on this thing right here, we are not celebrating until we get there. And then we start to rely on a lot of this, grit and determination to get us there. Versus if we have these little milestones that we can celebrate along the way, even if we need to pivot, we've been able to celebrate. And that's what I know is a big thing with high achievers. Even when I ask the question of like, how are you going to celebrate? People are like, what? I always remember that's a really big question that comes up a lot of times, because I kind of have this brain-based goal setting, component to to coach with my clients, and it's always about like how you're going to celebrate. And a lot of them just don't know how to celebrate. And it's so important to take a moment to acknowledge the success that you have created, because if we were talking about burnout, like that's, that's something that will definitely get you to the burnout piece if you just keep kind of trying to grind against, the natural, I guess, motivation and energy. And so just, and it doesn't have to be big. Like even when you're doing your to-do list, and I, even encourage my clients, once you've kind of done those big 3 for the day, then take a brain break, go to get some fresh air, have a sweet tea, or reward yourself with your cup of coffee once you've been able to get those top 3 things done. Because it's amazing how our brains are then going to work more for us, because our brains are going to see, oh, this feels good. Oh, I'm rewarded. I'm going to keep, doing this for you. Whereas, if our brains are wired to keep us in the safe and familiar, and we are trying to step up outside of this comfort zone to up level in our business and achieve these big goals, and we're not giving ourselves time to reward ourselves, our brain has these little temper tantrums that is going to keep kind of pulling you back. And that often contributes to that whole, stop and go. Whereas you have to kind of train your brain to also see like, no, this is good. Me up leveling and stepping out of my comfort zone is healthy, and it's going to get me closer to that goal. But you need to reward yourself along the way. So combining the, the dopamine, the feel good chemical, but also the oxytocin, the love chemical, at the same time of that, to really thank yourself and celebrate your own successes. Because I think as high achievers are really good at celebrating everybody else's successes, but we also need to be reminded that it's okay to celebrate that we're doing a good job, because that's going to keep us heading in the right direction.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So the last thing I just want to touch on too is I know that you talk a little bit about loops of procrastination. So what causes you to get stuck in that? Because I've done that sometimes. I'm sure we've all done that, but I definitely work with clients that they just find that they want to do something so bad. They just keep pushing it off. So how do you help them break through that?
I guess it comes down to like sort of the neuroscience kind of method or neurocoaching method, to find out what's coming up for them. Like what is causing the procrastination, and kind of looking at, a lot of times, this is a really good example, is oftentimes going live, right? People procrastinate going live. So like that's sort of like the situation, and you're, ask, okay, what's coming up? Like why, what's coming up for you to not go live? And it's like, and then they share, well, this fear of people judging them. And then diving into like, okay, so let's go into like, they share about, when they've done something in the past and they were judged for it. And so then it's about being able to find some evidence to help your brain see that, you've stepped up and done something else in the past that actually was really successful. And then, work through, I call it the achievement mindset method, and working through that to help your brain find evidence to the opposite of this automatic thought that's going through your brain. And that's always what is so fascinating, right? It's when we automatically always think all these negative things, like someone's going to judge me, and then someone's going to, post negative comments on my wall, and then that's going to just like tear me apart. Whereas when you try to get them to find evidence where they've done something that they have been successful, you can see their brain protecting them. But it's always so neat, especially with high achievers. Because you've got the logic, right, in the front of your brain, then the subconscious. And oftentimes it's fascinating watching and having conversations with high achievers, because they'll say something and then they'll logically support it, right? And it's like, no, that's your logic brain working, but what's deep inside, and really like digging those layers. And that's why, and we talk about this actually a bit in the summit, scheduling your bravery. Because if you can schedule your bravery, like scheduling the live, and then really honing in on what's coming up, what is the story around you going live, that's the first step in being able to really identify something that might be on autopilot that's coming up for you. And then it's at that point, it's a moment, like, and you kind of mentioned it before, like where you kind of, that there's a bit of excitement or there's a nervousness, like that's kind of your brain talking to you, letting you know that there's definitely something coming up. And so, I often say, like, become an investigator, put the investigator hat on and start to investigate what's coming up for you. Is there a story? Is there something that was maybe said to you as a child, or was there a situation? A a lot of times relates to even schooling, right? When we think about the success, like in schooling, maybe you heard a lot, like, well, you need to do better on that test or things like that. Like if you hear that all the time, you get in this, it's got to be kind of perfect, right? And that whole needs to be perfect gets us this whole procrastination because we're so afraid that's not going to be perfect. And what are people going to think of as the judgment piece that's going to come along with it? So hopefully that kind of answers the question there and helps that.
Yeah, no, you know what? I love what you said about the evidence file. So, I mean, I conduct most of my clients' sessions and everything on Trello specifically. And I always create a card for them called their evidence file, especially when they're having trouble leaning into a belief or a way they want to show up. And they're just like, yeah, but I have all this evidence that I'm not this person, or I can't achieve this, or I've never done this before. So I'm like, okay, every time you see something that supports who you want to be or this new version, you have to upload it. And sometimes they're like, oh my gosh, I just caught my abs in the mirror. Check this out. Look, this is happening. And sometimes it's like, hey, I meal prepped every day this week. Or sometimes it's like, look at, I'm getting my sleep, even though I'm always believed I'm someone who struggles with my sleep. So creating this evidence file. And I think it's so important not only to do that, with our health, but as entrepreneurs, like my very, very first business coach called it a smile file. And it was all of the results I've gotten my clients, the wonderful things people have said, all of that kind of stuff that as entrepreneurs, I think it is totally normal that we experience a wide range of emotions here. It's a roller coaster being an entrepreneur. That's part of what we signed up for is the excitement, but also, oh my gosh, all my links aren't working and it's launch time, right? But like, really understanding and feeling that is normal. And on those days where, maybe you didn't have a good sleep and you're not managing your emotions as well as you'd like, and it's just one of those days that we all have, there is an evidence file there for you, reminding you, I guess, of your why at the same point. Like, hey, I am making a difference. Even though right now it's not like the difference I feel like I wanted to be making, this is how I am. This is who I am. This is how I show up in the world. And I think that having that, like you said, that evidence to support the new beliefs, that's the only way we break old beliefs is when you can find that something else can also be true. So, it's so good.
And we're guilty as high achievers. Like, and I think I said this earlier, right? We just don't celebrate our successes. We're always looking at the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. We're just so driven by that, right? But then when things come up, like somebody maybe putting a comment, one comment will just completely like throw us off. But, taking a second to, okay, that's one comment, but look at these 900 positive comments, right? To see that, and it's just that friendly reminder to, as high achievers, that really take time to celebrate your successes, right? Because even, and this is something that I've worked on a lot, even myself, like flipping the word fail upside down and looking at it as it's the first attempt in learning. Like you're only going to be able to get better by taking that first step. And it kind of goes back to that whole, procrastination piece. We feel like it's got to be perfect right out of the gates, but the reality is, things take like 3 to 5 times to be able to really kind of reach, that excellence piece. And, just being reminded, I have a background in education. So, and it's funny because like, even as an educator, we say this to our students, but yet we don't always apply it to ourselves. So that's something that I've really been driving home. Like fail is first attempt in learning, and just keep saying that. And I have found, by saying that to myself, saying that, done is better than perfect, putting a timer on, like that's been a huge game changer, putting a timer on, saying I'm going to spend this much time on this activity or this task. And then after it, it's going to go out there. It's just going to, right. And I'm going to get feedback. And from that, I'm going to make it better. And that's how we're going to be able to improve ourselves. So hopefully that's a little bit helpful as well to tackle that.
It's so well timed. I literally just posted a quote from my business coach today, and it says, avoiding failure means that you are only doing what you know how to do and you're avoiding your growth. I love that. So I run right into failure. Oh, this has been such a great conversation. So I just kind of want to bring it home. At the beginning, when we started chatting, I mentioned that you had invited me to be part of a summit, which I'm so excited to share. I know this is like the perfect thing for, the Becoming Limitless audience, because we are all about optimizing our brain and our focus. And that comes down to our energy and our productivity as well. So can you share more about this summit that I think everyone will be dying to get their hands on?
Yes. I'm the host of a virtual summit called Productivity Secrets of Female Millionaires, and really diving into being able to, master your mindset, right? Up level your leadership skills, supercharge your productivity, diving into kind of 5 pillars that, I've noticed as entrepreneurs that, sometimes we get so bogged into like just running the business that, things that, might be nice to spend a little bit more time on or have a little bit more knowledge on. So, looking at our mindset, of course, as leadership, looking at finances, scaling as well, right? If we're trying to really be able to up level and create this greater impact, we want to be able to scale. So looking at scaling systems, and of course, high performance productivity habits as well. So diving into, of course, like all these, productivity, like what I like to call productivity secrets. And it's been phenomenal. I've interviewed most of my speakers so far, and I personally take pages and pages of notes throughout these interviews, and it's phenomenal. I have just over around 30 speakers right now, and it's a 5-day event. And I'm so excited to really be able to share what these amazing speakers have to offer. And it really is about, learning these, these mindset skills and these others, just productivity and leadership skills to really be able to, work towards building, an empire, but also about the impact. Like for me, the focus is really much on the impact, right? The more you're able to up level, the more you're able to create a greater impact in the world. And then, that translates to, building $1 million business, but it really is that impact that we really get to create. And to me, it's also doing it without burnout, like really being able to make it possible without this burnout, right? So diving into some self-care items as well, which is, is really, really important. And so I'm super, super excited. I really hope that, the listeners, are excited to attend this event. The website to grab your ticket is productivitysecretsfemalemillionaires.com. So it's productivitysecretsfemalemillionaires.com. And I believe you're going to put the link in the show notes. But yeah, it's awesome. It's 5 days. Each day you'll get an email with access to the interviews for that day. And so kind of come one, come all.
And you get to hear me too. I'll be there too. That's so, I loved, as soon as you told me the title, like Productivity Secrets of Female Millionaires, I was like, that is like the sexiest title. I absolutely love it. So if you're listening to this podcast the week that it goes live, then the event will be starting on Sunday, May 16th, 2021, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And even if you are listening afterwards, like there is an all access pass available. So the interviews will be available to access afterwards. You'll just need to purchase to be able to access them. But this event from the 16th of May until 20th is free to attend and listen to all these interviews.
Oh, that's so fun. So like I said, the link to grab your free ticket will be in the description, and as well as all the places that you can find Alex Lianne Carter, her Instagram, her website, all of the fun stuff like that. So any final words before we close out today?
I think for me, I believe very much, we've got one life, so let's live it to the fullest. And what I've learned when I was trying to do that, but stretching myself so thin, that there really was like an easier and better way to go about it, that we can really, be successful. Those of us that are moms and business owners, we can do that while still really enjoying life to the fullest and doing it all without having to be overworked and stretching ourselves so thin and end up burnt out in the process. Mm-hmm. And really inviting everyone to also try to really be in the moment. I think that that's what happens when we try to do so many things, is that we literally run from one thing to the next. And so, kind of slow down to speed up and really try to enjoy living in the moment and make the most of everything.
Oh, so good. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with us and coming on for the first official interview on the Becoming Limitless podcast. It was a lot of fun talking to you again. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Ready to begin each day feeling energized and focused? I'd love to work with you one-on-one. In my Becoming Limitless program, you're going to learn how to optimize your brain and body with science and biohacking so you can be highly productive and grow your business faster. Join me over at TanessaShears.com/work with me. I'll see you there.